Let's get to the story of the day. It was September 2009, and I had returned home from a jog utterly frozen. I was feeling cold and wanted to light a fire in our fireplace. My broad sports pants had caught fire, I observed. I attempted to extinguish the flames with my hands, but it did not work. The supplied air appeared to make them climb faster and stronger, and my jeans and jacket soon caught fire. I'm always amazed by this moment when I look back on it today, because I wasn't afraid at the time. It just happened, and I was just a mute observer of what was going on around me. I didn't yell or call for aid because everything felt strange and almost remote controlled to me. I recall vividly the moment I realized I could no longer control the flames. Meanwhile, it had eaten its way up through the synthetic garments, and its flames were now crashing into my face with full power. When my long hair eventually caught fire and I couldn't breathe because of the raging flames, an all-encompassing aha moment struck, and I realized, that's it for now. Give up. You're now dead. Breathing had become impossible, and my prospect of calling for aid had vanished. I had lost control, and there was nothing I could do anymore. The most striking aspect of that moment was that I didn't feel any pain, and I don't recall feeling any anxiety. That moment was just this overwhelming knowledge. Now you're dying, and then realizing it's okay. From the perspective of today, this was the greatest gift of my life. I'd had enough. I did nothing else because there was nothing else I could do, and so was made one of my most critical decisions: to let it happen, to accept. It is exceedingly tough for me to find the correct words for these feelings and ideas 8 years later. It's also not something that can be adequately articulated or explained with human language. It's a split second that encompasses everything and nothing, complete inner silence and anticipation of what will happen now. Yet, it's the most glorious realization of the absolute. My life, on the other hand, did not pass me by in a type of time lapse, as many people who've had NDEs describe it. Rather, I was overcome with the knowledge that my prior life was just as right and good as it had been. Without depression or concern, there's nothing that needs to be finished, no responsibility, just a thought. I appeared to be utterly missing from the sensation of time, because all of these deep impressions came to me in a very short period of time, which is ordinarily required for 3 or 4 breaths. It felt like an all-encompassing, wandering eternity at the same moment. I could write pages and pages about what was going on inside me in that instant, but it was just a moment in which I had to commit myself completely and, most importantly, consciously into the hands of my higher authority. I didn't have a choice any longer. I relinquished all human control and let go. I suddenly saw this body, into which I had just focused all of my attention and consciousness from the perspective of an observer. From the outside, I felt a sense of neutrality as I saw him stagger slowly but steadily, waving his arms around aimlessly. He couldn't stay like this much longer. That was crystal evident to me at the time. When my son appeared at the door, my neutral awareness of what was happening to my body turned to joy. He realized how terrible the situation was at the age of 14 and acted fast by going towards my body, pulling it apart and putting out the flames with a carpet he managed to grasp. I seemed to be rather distant from what was going on and followed his efforts to help me fairly neutrally, as if I were just a bystander. I witnessed him hurry to the phone, as well as the arrival of paramedics and the landing of the rescue chopper. My consciousness had detached from my body, and I appeared to be standing next to it, watching, like a spectator or bystander. But nothing could take my focus away from him. No dead loved ones to greet me, no bright light to perceive, no dark tunnel or other changes, nothing. Instead, I was able to observe the kind emergency doctor in the helicopter tend to my body, which was lying comfortably on a kind of couch on wheels. The rush began when paramedics transferred my body from the helicopter to the hospital. Doctors raced over and moved it unerringly towards the emergency department. He had bottles and hoses on his stomach but seemed fine. He appeared to be deeply and relaxedly sleeping. All the commotion around him perplexed me. I could hear the paramedics conversing with the physicians, see what they were doing to my body and how they were transporting it to an operating room, but no one seemed to notice me, which perplexed me. Nobody could see me on this human level. Neither my son, nor the ER doctor on the helicopter, let alone the busy doctors in the hospital, answered my inquiries, and no one seemed to see or hear me no matter what I tried. This was the only thing that bothered me the entire time. Am I gone? My body just lay there, and for the first time since being admitted to the hospital, I was able to look at it in peace. Meanwhile, he'd been relocated to a quiet double room in the intensive care unit, and everything had quieted down around us, save for the beeping of some machines. He appeared to be well cared for, as numerous devices monitored his functions and innumerable hoses supplied him with everything he required. However, he gave me a bizarre visual of him lying there on a ventilator, his chest rising and falling. His hands and entire head were bound in bandages, leaving only a narrow mouth gap through which tubing from some equipment hung. He merely laid there, motionless and empty, and seemed to wait calmly in his own way. I, on the other hand, sat at the foot of his bed, and my mind raced with ideas. What does that even mean? I was present. I almost feel like I'm alive. Why don't I feel the same way he does? Most importantly, if I'm truly dead, why am I still alive? Why don't I call it quits with him? What am I still waiting for? I was almost ready to accept this bizarre, raptured state when I heard a warm, soothing voice behind me. Someone appeared to have entered the room, and he seemed to see me very well. And when he appeared, the vibe in the partly darkened area altered abruptly. Anke, you're not dead. I heard a gentle voice. When I turned around, I was met with the adoring gaze of a pretty large male luminary who seemed to fill the entire room with his presence. Don't worry, my love. You'll receive answers to all your questions. There's nothing here that's relevant to you right now, so I'd like to show you something. And thus began the most exciting journey of my life. This light form carried me away from my body and showed me what consciousness is and is made of. I was instructed and educated to ask 1,000 questions and receive 10,000 responses. I became aware of connections I had never considered before, and my patient teacher guided me through all of the areas that were essential to me. I saw how our human body is linked to higher vibrational levels, what it truly means to integrate soul parts, to relieve blocks. He showed me what it truly means to extend your awareness, how our human eye is tied to it, and a plethora of other things. I got to experience everything I'd always suspected. In these realms, time does not exist, and everything, absolutely everything, occurs at the same time, parallel and with incredible intensity. We visited the chamber where my body was in a coma several times, and my teacher also taught me what it means to truly embrace the physical body for what it is, a vessel that allows us here as humans to have our dualistic experiences, a vessel that wishes to be inhabited by our high consciousness and craves connection. My spiritual teacher urged me to tune into my physical body on one of these visits to the sick room, to feel into it and make direct contact with it. I felt narrow and heavy. I was struck by his limitations, but also by his creativity, its perpetual renewal, its limitless possibilities, and his unique way of connecting with me. For the first time, I was allowed to investigate him and listen to his stories. My teacher took me back and forth between the levels several times. I experienced what we call unconditionalness, yet it is so much more than words can express. A love for all that is, a love without boundaries, and most importantly, a love that exists in all of us. It is present in every grain of sand, every cell, every idea. It is all-encompassing. Space and time had no bearing on this event, which was equally remarkable because everything, literally everything, happened at the same time. What we call the past or the future does not exist, or exists solely for us people. Because the future as such does not exist, we always and at every instant have the choice of which future we wish to build for ourselves. Everything shifts. Everything changes when we move our perspective and concentrate our attention in a slightly different direction. He asked me the most crucial question I'd ever been asked in my life as he brought me back to the level where my body was in a coma. Anka, you can now make a choice. It's entirely up to you. Do you want to return to this, your body, or do you want to bid farewell to it right now? From today's perspective, I don't believe it was ever about dying and leaving these levels, but rather about tremendous realizations, about the decision, of connection, of the effect, of the truth. It's always come down to saying yes to myself. I was free to say yes to myself, to being human, and to my body consciously. I was able to consciously merge back into him, connect, flow into his cells, sense his limitations and density. A huge sensation. I loved him for who he was, even if he wasn't perfect at the time. I accepted him, and everything in me, or him, filled me with joy. Thankfully, he was still available to me, and I could stay here. I felt gratitude for this extraordinary training, gratitude to myself, courage and strength, and most importantly, trust. Everything has changed since then. Life goes on around me in the same delightful way it always has, but I'm unique. Even now, 8 years later, I seem to stand in awe like an observer next to everything, and I've had the blessing of constantly having this spiritual perspective. I am totally present in my body while also being in the unconditional state of my soul, looking at everything down here and simply smiling. My attention is moved. Don't search anymore. Only find. No more pressure. No more must and should. Just an unqualified yes to me and my reality as I can experience it so delightfully. All of my fears have vanished. Fear of death or any other occurrence has fully vanished. I no longer fear pain or suffering.